I grew up eating bun, xiaolongbao, and dumplings. I always thought dumplings are exclusively Chinese things until I had Manti in Uzbek restaurants.
Khinkali in Georgian restaurants, Momo in Nepali restaurants, and mandu in Korean restaurants. They look like xiaolongbao, but the size, dough, filling, seasonings, and toppings are uniquely distinct from others. These countries are thousands of miles apart and have different cultures and religions. But how on earth do the dumplings look insanely similar?
Who actually invented the first dumplings?
Did China invent the first dumpling and they were introduced to other countries, or the other way around? And most importantly,
How did they travel to and are loved by so many countries and cultures?
let's start with one of my favorites, Uzbek Manti.
People familiar with Uzbek or Central Asian cuisines know that they are big on grilling.
Baking and stewing. But Manti is steamed, which makes them quite unique compared to their usual cooking method. The first time I had Manti, I love it. Not only because it tastes great and the size is big, but because it reminds me of the soup dumpling, xiaolongbao I grew up eating.
Just in a different flavor profile, but in a great way. Then I got curious and dug a little deeper.
I found out that a lot of countries in Central Asia and the Middle East also have Manti, and Koreans call their dumplings mandu. Japan has Manju. Those countries were thousands of miles apart.
The name that I used to describe those dumplings sounds quite similar. Is it a coincidence or did it come from the same root word?
Decades ago in the Turpan Basin, a region in western China, archaeologists discovered the remains of dumplings and pastries in the Astana Cemetery, the burial site of descendants of Chinese settlers from the ancient city of Gaochan from the 4th century. The dumplings and pastries were buried alongside them.
This find is truly extraordinary because it is incredibly rare to find food in archaeological sites as they tend to spoil quickly over time.
But thanks to Turpan's extremely dry climate, these dumplings were preserved. This might be the oldest evacuated dumplings, and they dated back to the early 4th centuries, suggesting that dumplings have existed for more than 1,500 years. Today, we call a small dough with filling a dumpling.
However, at the time those dumplings were buried, they were known as mantou.
Mantou in modern China refers to a type of steamed wheat bun. It doesn't come with filling, and you wouldn't call it a dumpling. If you compare mantou and manti, the difference is even greater. Manti actually looks more like a larger version of xiaolongbao or Chinese dumplings, or buns but with transparent dough skin. In fact, mantou used to refer to xiaolongbao as well as all dumplings and buns in China.
It is very likely that Manti, Manta, and Manju are all descendants of Mantou.
The word mantou first appeared in a short but enthusiastic essay, written around 300 AD. The author, Shushi,
enthusiastically wrote about the beauty of mantou making process and how delicious and appealing it became.
He also noted that people enjoy mantou during the springtime. This appears to be the world's first written document about dumplings. Back in the day, the Chinese got quite creative with stuffing all sorts of meats and vegetables into dough,
and it became a popular food among all social classes.
During the Song Dynasty in 1241, Japanese monks who had been studying in China brought home a variety of food, one of them being mantou. The Japanese renamed it to manju, though they kept the same kanji as the Chinese word.
At first, manju was savory and eaten with chopstick, along with soup and pickles,
but was later changed to a sweet dessert and filled with wrapping paste to suit Japanese taste. Since then, manju has become a classic wagashi, a traditional Japanese sweet, and was widely enjoyed during tea ceremonies and festivals. At the time manju was brought into Japan, China wasn't a unified empire. The Mongol Empire in the north became super powerful and rapidly conquering and expanding their territory all the way to the Caspian Sea under the rule of Genghis Khan, and eventually conquered China under Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan.
The Mongol Empire at its peak was so damn big. In fact, it was the largest land empire in world history,
stretching from the Pacific Ocean in the east all the way to the Persian Gulf in the west. Although good technologies and culture had been Traded along the Silk Road for nearly 1,500 years, it wasn't until the unification of Eurasia under the Mongols and their protection of caravans and trade routes that the Silk Road entered its golden age.
For the first time in centuries, the trade route became significantly safer. The reason why so many different places, though miles apart, have similar names for dumplings became clear.
During the Mongol Empire, mantou was introduced to various regions, spreading from China to Korea, Central Asia, and eventually reaching as far as Turkey and Afghanistan. The reason it started in China, but not the other way around, is because
In ancient times, trade routes is the only way of connecting distant regions. The fact that Korea also has mandu, despite having no direct connection with Central Asia or the Middle East, along with the earliest written records and archaeological discoveries,
suggests that Manti and mandu likely originated from Mantou. The size of Uzbek Manti is huge, and the filling is minced lamb or beef mixed with onion. The skin is thin and the meat is flavorful. The best part is you eat it with yogurt and onion sauce, which is quite different from how East Asians eat their dumplings. It was super delicious. Turkish manti are boiled instead of steamed, much smaller than the Central Asian ones, and served with garlic yogurt and spiced butter for a light tangy flavor. Afghan mantu are medium-sized steamed dumplings topped with a rich garlic yogurt and a split chickpea sauce. Korean mandu is probably the closest one to their Chinese counterpart, though the filling and dipping sauce have a Korean twist.
while the name Manti and mandu stay the same since the 14th century. People in China use the word bao and jiaozi
To distinguish a large steamed bun with thicker skin and a dumpling with thinner and transparent skin.
Why is that?
Starting from the 17th century, China was ruled by the Qing dynasty.
Possibly because the Manchu way of describing a steamed bun with filling is pronounced similar to bao, so bao eventually became the official word to describe the steamed bun with filling. Alright, so Manti and mandu do sound similar to mantou, but how about Momo? Momo doesn't sound like mantou.
Momo is a steam-filled dumpling in Tibetan and Nepali cuisine. In my opinion, what makes Momo really special and uniquely distinct from other steamed dumplings is the combination of spices that make the filling super flavorful. And when you dip the Momo into this beautiful, delicious, and fiery orange sauce, you just want to keep eating them nonstop. The word Momo comes from Tibetan.
And historians believe that the Tibetan word is borrowed from what people in northwestern China call their steamed bun in their dialect.
However, the traditional Tibetan momos are quite different from the Nepalese momos. The Tibetan momo was made with a thicker dough, and filling is usually yak or potatoes and cheese with little or no spices.
It's unclear how Momo was introduced to Nepal from Tibet, perhaps by monks or merchants.
But what for sure is that it's evolved into a truly unique Nepali dish that we are lucky to enjoy today, all thanks to its journey to Nepal. And did I forget to mention, sometimes I prefer Momo over all other dumplings.
Okay, so this one it's really hard.
Khinkali is a proud Georgian dish that looks more like xiaolongbao than any other manti or mandu. It has this twisty knob on top, very thick, and you are not supposed to eat it. You are supposed to use your hand to grab the knob and take your first bite. The filling is minced meat with a variety of spices and herbs, and is super juicy and flavorful. Some historians suggested that Khinkali was introduced to Georgia from China through the Mongols, just like how mantou spread to Central Asia. Yes, Georgia was once part of the Mongol Empire.
But still, how the hell does it have a completely different name instead of something that sounds like mantou?
Did Georgia come up with their own version in parallel?
I am still working on that part and I haven't figured it out yet, but I want to tell a personal story about Khinkali.
Last year in late fall, I traveled alone to a town in the Czech Republic. The night was cold and the town was empty, which made my already exhausted body and soul even more exhausted. I walked into a nearby restaurant and I couldn't understand the menu, but because they showed pictures, I ordered Khinkali.
When I look back on that night, all I remember is how a Georgian dumpling has warmed my heart and soul on a cold night in a foreign country.
Not just because it was delicious, but because it reminded me of home.
So back to our original questions, which is the title of this video. Who invented the first dumplings? Honestly, the questions doesn't matter.
Although ancient Chinese texts might have the earliest mention of mantou, it's still hard to say who actually invented it first. The Silk Road existed hundreds of years before the earliest Chinese records.
So it's possible it was invented elsewhere like the Middle East, but it wasn't written down, and then it made its way to China through trade, and the Chinese loved it and wrote it down. Or it could have developed in parallel. To me, what really matters is how dumplings evolved to so many varieties and connected us in an unexpected way.
It would be so boring if dumplings only came in a few flavors or had just one way of being made. The fact that they've traveled across cultures and developed into so many delicious forms shows that we might actually have more in common than we think.